The message came through at 3:17 on a Wednesday afternoon while I was folding tissue paper around a silk blouse for one of my regular customers. My phone buzzed against the counter, a little tremor that should have been ordinary. But when I glanced at the screen, my world tilted. It's over. I filed the papers. Miami tomorrow. I emptied the joint account. That was all my husband Michael sent. 15 years of marriage, a shared life, a teenage daughter at home, reduced to one text message and a smirk hidden in those clipped words. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the blouse. My fingers tightened around the paper until it crinkled, but my face stayed still, the way it had so many times when he mocked me in front of others. The bell above the boutique door jingled as the customer left her heels, tapping across the sidewalk, and suddenly I was alone with the buzzing silence of betrayal. My hands shook, not from despair, but from the steady thrum of something sharper. Rage. Cold, focused rage. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their steady glare pooling across the polished counter where I had built every piece of my so-called little shop. Michael's favorite insult. Your hobby, he'd sneer at family dinners. Yet that hobby had kept our bills paid, our daughter clothed, while his paychecks vanished into golf trips, designer suits, and dinners for two that didn't include me. Now, he was in Miami, flaunting some 20-something he thought would erase the years and the responsibilities he had run from. He thought he had gutted me by taking the account. He thought I would crumble. He thought wrong. I slid open the bottom drawer of the counter, the one I kept locked with a key only I carried. Inside sat a thick blue folder, edges worn from months of careful preparation, bank statements, screenshots of his messages with her, receipts from hotels under fake names, copies of every withdrawal he thought I wouldn't notice, my lawyer's card, paper-clipped neatly at the front. Denise had told me, preparation isn't paranoia, Rebecca. It's survival. In that moment, those words rang louder than the betrayal. My pulse slowed. The chaos of his text crystallized into clarity. Michael had just declared war in 4 sentences. What he didn't know was that I had been building my defenses for months, brick by brick, receipt by receipt. My eyes burned as I stared at his message again. The gall of it, to end a marriage by text, to drain the account we had built together, the account where I deposited every dollar of boutique sales, to think he could humiliate me, leave me penniless, and vanish into a South Beach hotel suite with a grin. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Don't bother calling. The account's mine. Judge will laugh at your little boutique. That was the knife twist, the humiliation he craved. I imagined his smirk, his cologne-heavy bravado, the way he leaned too close to young women when he thought no one noticed. For a heartbeat, bile rose in my throat, the metallic taste of betrayal, stinging like blood. But then I breathed slow and steady and reached for the folder. He wanted me broken. Instead, he had handed me the opening move. The shop smelled faintly of lavender sachets and new fabric, the scents I had chosen carefully, scents that made customers linger. But in that moment, the air carried something else, the acrid tang of fire, catching in my chest, a flame I had no intention of extinguishing. My daughter Lily, 14 years old, was at home finishing homework. She still believed her father was a provider, a protector. She didn't know the truth, that he had chosen selfishness over family long ago. I thought of her eyes, wide and searching, and I knew this wasn't just my fight. This was about showing her what strength looked like when the ground collapsed beneath your feet. I straightened my spine, closed the drawer, and locked it. My reflection in the boutique mirror startled me. Not broken, not defeated, but sharp eyes, like glass catching the light. If Michael thought a text could dismantle me, he had underestimated the woman who had balanced his debts, who had smiled through his insults, who had stitched her life back together too many times to count. The war he started with that message would not end the way he imagined. The bell jingled again as another customer entered asking about a scarf in the window. I smiled, voice calm, steady, professional. The storm could rage inside me, but out here I was unshakable. The text still glowed on my screen, its cruelty undeniable, but beneath it all, one thought anchored me. He believed he had taken everything. He hadn't. Not yet. Not by a long shot. My name is Rebecca Turner. I am 42 years old, and for most of my adult life, I have been known as Michael Turner's wife. To the outside world, we looked like the picture of stability, a husband in finance, a wife who ran a boutique on Main Street, a teenage daughter who made good grades. But appearances are liars. What people didn't see was how often I had dimmed my own light so Michael's could shine. 15 years earlier, I had turned down a promotion at the publishing house where I worked because Michael wanted to pursue his MBA. It'll be good for both of us, he promised, and I believed him. I took on extra shifts at a coffee shop and freelance editing jobs to keep the bills paid while he studied. I kept every receipt back then, too, out of habit, filing them in neat envelopes, because that was my way of feeling in control. Later, when he landed a job at a financial firm, I thought the sacrifices were worth it. For a while, he was charming, ambitious, full of plans. But Michael's ambition always came with a price. The more successful he appeared, the more he dismissed what I did. "It's cute, your little shop," he said, when I opened the boutique. Cute, as though the lease I had signed, the long nights I spent designing, displays the payroll I managed were child's play. My boutique was not a hobby. It was my independence stitched together from fabric and persistence. Yet to him, it was something to belittle whenever relatives gathered. I remember one Thanksgiving when his mother asked how the store was doing. Before I could answer, Michael laughed, fork clinking against his glass. "She plays shop while I make the real money," he said. The table erupted in chuckles. I smiled politely, but inside something cracked. Our daughter Lily was only 10 at the time, and even then I saw confusion cloud her face. She adored her father, but she also saw me quiet, steady, standing in the shadow of his arrogance. By 14, she had grown sharper, quicker to question his absences, his vague explanations. Still, I shielded her from the worst of it. I told myself she deserved one parent she could believe in, even if I carried the burden of knowing the truth. Michael's disdain wasn't limited to words. His spending habits spiraled as the years went on. Golf clubs, luxury watches, weekends that ended with receipts from restaurants where 2 entrees never included my favorite. He was a man obsessed with appearances, polished on the outside, hollow within. And I was the one who quietly balanced the accounts, who trimmed the grocery budget, who made sure Lily's school trips were covered. Each sacrifice added weight to my shoulders, but I carried it because that's what wives did, or so I thought. Yet, somewhere along the way, my patience hardened into something else. Each insult, each smirk, each careless withdrawal became another brick in a wall of resolve. The boutique wasn't just a store. It was proof that I could build something from nothing, that I could survive without his approval. And Lily wasn't just my daughter. She was my reason to endure, my reminder that strength mattered more than pretense. So when that text message came, I wasn't shattered. I was prepared. He thought he had humiliated me with 4 sentences, but in truth, he had confirmed what I had known for years. Michael Turner was not my partner, he was my adversary. And unlike him, I didn't enter battles unarmed. The truth is, Michael's text didn't come out of nowhere. Looking back, the trail of breadcrumbs stretched months, even years behind us. They were small at first, the kind of things you could dismiss if you wanted to believe in someone. A charge at a hotel that didn't match his business trip schedule. A gym membership I hadn't approved tucked between our joint account withdrawals. When I asked, he laughed it off. Networking doesn't happen at home, Rebecca. Don't be so provincial. His smirk made me feel like the nagging wife, the killjoy. But I stopped asking and started documenting. Every time I balanced the boutique's receipts against the joint account, I kept copies. $100 here, $400 there, sometimes over 1,000 in one weekend. I built a private file, not because I wanted to leave him, but because some instinct told me one day I would need to prove what I already knew. The humiliation began to seep into public spaces. At his mother's birthday dinner, seated at the long table with cousins and uncles, I reached for a roll just as Michael leaned back, glass of wine in hand. Rebecca still thinks her little boutique is a business, he chuckled. The room laughed with him. I froze, cheeks burning, as though my work, the payroll I juggled, the invoices I sent the customers who depended on me, was a parlor trick. He looked at me, then daring me to contradict him. I didn't. I smiled tightly, but I memorized every face at that table, every smirk, every complicit chuckle. They would all remember this moment too, when the truth came out. There were other signs, too blatant to ignore. A charge for a weekend in Miami, labeled under his company's name, though I knew his firm hadn't scheduled any off-site that month. Hotel receipts with room service for 2. The perfume Lily found in his car that didn't belong to either of us. When she asked about it, her 14-year-old voice, sharp, suspicious, he brushed it aside. Don't snoop in the glove compartment. That's rude. He never apologized. He never thought he had to. His arrogance was its own defense. Then came the whispers. A friend of mine, who worked at a travel agency, pulled me aside one afternoon. She had seen his name pop up more than once, on reservations, always with a female companion, always billed to our joint account. She looked at me with pity I couldn't stomach. I thanked her, walked away, and added her note to the growing file in my drawer. The worst part wasn't the infidelity. It wasn't even the money. It was the way Michael carried himself, as if I were invisible. He could humiliate me in public, flirt shamelessly in private, and still come home expecting dinner on the table. He thought my silence was weakness. But in silence, I gathered strength. I learned not to confront him directly. He thrived on shouting matches, on twisting words, until I doubted myself. Instead, I listened. I smiled. I collected. Each receipt, each statement, each careless text became another strand in the web I was weaving. I stopped seeing myself as the dutiful wife waiting to be rescued. I was a witness. I was an archivist of his downfall. And every page in that folder was one step closer to the day his smirk would finally fade. The night I first walked into Denise Carter's office, I remember the smell of lemon polish on her mahogany desk and the quiet tick of the clock above her law degree. Denise was in her 50s, silver hair, cut into a sleek bob, eyes sharp as glass. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Tell me why you're here," she said, folding her hands. I told her everything: Michael's withdrawals, the Miami trips, the humiliation at his mother's birthday dinner, the way he sneered at my boutique, as though I were a child playing dress-up. My voice shook at first, then steadied as the story unfurled. She listened without interrupting, just jotting notes on a yellow pad, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back. "You've done more work than most clients who come to me. Documentation is power, Rebecca. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's survival." The phrase struck deep, lodging itself like a commandment. She laid out the plan with the precision of a surgeon. First, open a separate account in my name. Only one he couldn't touch. Second, quietly transfer a portion of the boutique's earnings there each week. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to build a cushion. Third, copy every bank statement, every suspicious charge, and store them somewhere safe. "You don't accuse yet," Denise said. "You wait. Men like Michael hang themselves with their own rope if you give them time." I followed her advice with a discipline that surprised even me. Every morning, I set aside 5 minutes to move a fraction of my boutique's earnings into the new account. Every month, I visited the bank to request printed statements, paper trails harder to erase than digital files. I bought a safe, bolted it behind the stockroom wall, and tucked the folder inside. Each new document was another brick in the fortress I was quietly building. At night, while Michael scrolled on his phone with a smirk, I'd take screenshots of his messages left open on the counter. He never suspected I was watching. He never thought I could outmatch him. That arrogance was my greatest weapon. There were sacrifices, too. I stopped buying new stock in bulk, cut back on advertising, told my employees I needed to watch expenses. They thought it was because the boutique was struggling. In truth, I was funneling every spare dollar into that secret account, ensuring that when Michael finally played his hand, I wouldn't be left destitute. I even updated my will, leaving guardianship of Lily to my sister if anything happened. Every move was deliberate, careful, measured. And through it all, Denise was a steady voice in my ear. "Don't get emotional in front of him. Don't tip your hand. Let him think he's winning." So I did. When Michael strutted around in his tailored suits, boasting about his firm, I smiled and asked polite questions. When he laughed at my boutique in front of his friends, I sipped my wine and stayed silent. But inside, I counted down the days. Because I knew the moment was coming when his greed would outpace his caution, when he would cross a line even he couldn't deny. And when that moment came, I would be ready, not with tears, not with pleas, but with evidence so airtight the truth would cut sharper than any blade. Michael didn't stop at that first text. Betrayal rarely does. Later that same evening, as I closed the boutique and turned off the lights, my phone lit up again. "Don't bother calling. The account's mine now. Judge will laugh at your little boutique." The words stung, but more than that, they revealed exactly how he saw me. Not as a partner, not even as an opponent, but as a joke. I took a screenshot naming the file, with the date and time before saving it into the encrypted folder Denise had taught me to keep. At home, Lily was sprawled on the couch doing homework. She looked up, sensing my tension. "Everything okay, Mom?" she asked. I smiled tightly, kissed her forehead, and told her to keep studying. The truth would come later. For now, she didn't need to see her father's cruelty spelled out on a glowing screen. More messages followed over the next days, each dripping with arrogance. "I'm done supporting your fantasy shop. You'll crawl back when you realize you can't survive without me. Maybe the next woman I marry will actually understand what success looks like. Every time I captured the words, labeled them, and filed them away, Denise's voice echoed evidence never blinks. Michael, on the other hand, reveled in flaunting his betrayal. On social media, he posted photos from Miami cocktails, by the pool, sunglasses perched on his smug face, a shadow of a younger woman visible in the corner of the frame. The captions were as sharp as knives. Finally free. New chapter. Friends and colleagues commented with congratulations, blind to the wreckage he was leaving behind. It was humiliating, yes, but also clarifying. Each post, each text, each public display was another thread in the rope he was tightening around his own neck. The final blow came one Friday night. My phone buzzed again, and this time his message was crueler than ever. Don't think the court will side with you. I've already moved money you'll never find. Enjoy your little fabrics and dust. Miami is paradise compared to you. For a moment, I felt the old heat of shame crawl up my neck. I could almost hear the laughter from his mother's birthday dinner, the dismissive tone he used when introducing me as playing shop. But then I opened the safe, pulled out the thick blue folder, and added the printed screenshot to the stack. Each word he spat became a weapon in my hands. I no longer saw the insults as wounds. They were exhibits waiting to be stamped, numbered, and presented in court. The irony was exquisite. Michael believed he was untouchable, that his status and charm would protect him. But his arrogance had blinded him. He had handed me the very tools of his destruction, neatly typed and time-stamped, impossible to deny. When I turned off my phone that night, sliding it onto the charger, I didn't feel beaten. I felt armed. Michael was laughing in Miami, thinking he had silenced me with 4 careless sentences. What he didn't know was that I was already building the case that would strip away his mask, expose his secrets, and finally wipe that smirk from his face. The following Monday morning, while Michael no doubt lounged in some hotel suite with a mimosa in hand, I sat at the boutique's back office with my laptop and a stack of papers. My first call was to the bank. Calmly, I explained that I needed to freeze all cards linked to our joint account, particularly the one with Michael as an authorized user. The customer service representative hesitated, but once I confirmed my identity and referenced the suspicious withdrawals, the line clicked with finality. His card access has been revoked, she said. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with satisfaction. For the first time in years, I had cut the strings binding me to his spending. Next, I contacted the boutique's payroll service. All future deposits, I instructed, must route exclusively into the new account in my name. My voice was steady, professional, the voice of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. When I hung up, I let out a long breath. It felt like shifting tectonic plates, quiet, but irreversible. That afternoon, I walked through the boutique, checking shelves and chatting with my employees. They sensed my calm, though none of them knew the storm brewing just beyond these walls. One of them asked, "Everything okay, Rebecca?" I smiled. Everything is under control. And it was. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was moving pieces on a board Michael didn't even realize existed. Meanwhile, the news trickled back in delicious fragments. A colleague of Michael's, whose wife shopped at my boutique, stopped by to pick up a dress. Leaning against the counter, she whispered, "You didn't hear it from me." But Michael tried to check into the Fontainebleau, and his card got declined. In front of the desk clerk, the concierge, everyone. She smirked, almost gleeful. He stormed out like a child. I thanked her, rang up her purchase, and slipped the detail into my mental ledger. That was the first taste of humiliation he would swallow. At home that evening, Lily curled up on the sofa, asking about her father. I didn't give her the sordid details. 14 is too young to carry that weight. But I told her the truth in pieces. Your dad made choices, I said gently. But we're going to be fine, because I've been preparing. Her eyes widened, then narrowed in determination. Good, she said, voice sharper than I expected. Don't let him win, Mom. It startled me how much steel I heard in her voice. She was young, but she was learning what resilience looked like. The reversal wasn't only financial. It was spiritual, emotional. Every time Michael tried to flaunt his freedom, the reality pressed harder against him. The boutique kept running, my employees paid on time, while his weekends of indulgence turned sour when the bills arrived and the cards didn't work. I imagined him at the hotel desk, that smug grin faltering as the clerk shook his head. That image alone was enough to carry me through the sleepless nights. He had meant to break me with that text. Instead, he had handed me the power to show him who I truly was. Not a joke, not a hobbyist, but a woman who knew how to fight battles silently until the moment of truth arrived. And this was only the beginning. It didn't take long for the calls to start. The first was from Helen, my 70-year-old mother-in-law, her voice thin and wavering over the line. Rebecca, don't make this worse than it is, she whispered, as though Michael were the fragile one. He just needs space. You shouldn't embarrass him by involving lawyers. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, staring at the sunlight spilling across the boutique floor. Embarrass him. He had humiliated me in front of her, in front of the whole family, more times than I could count. Yet in her eyes, I was the one risking scandal. Helen, I said evenly. Michael emptied our account and filed for divorce by text message. I won't protect him from the consequences. She gasped softly, as if I had broken some unspoken family code, then hung up without saying goodbye. That was only the beginning. A cousin reached out through social media. Rebecca, don't drag family into court. Handle it privately for Lily's sake. A neighbor stopped by the boutique and muttered something about how men sometimes stray and how women should be forgiving. Even friends who meant well tilted their heads with pity, suggesting maybe I should focus on rebuilding, not fighting. They didn't understand I wasn't fighting out of spite. I was fighting because silence had been his weapon for too long. Every comment, every whispered judgment felt like hands pushing me back into the corner Michael had carved for me. But I refused to step back. The pressure circled tighter at Sunday dinner with my parents, who had always been distant but pragmatic. My father cleared his throat, his fork clinking against his plate. Do you really want to air this out in court? Rebecca, divorce is ugly. Maybe take the settlement and move on. My chest tightened, but before I could respond, Lily's voice cut through the room. She shouldn't settle for anything my daughter said, her 14-year-old eyes blazing. Dad betrayed her. Why should she make it easy? The room fell silent. My father looked away. My mother fiddled with her napkin. But Lily didn't waver. That night, as I tucked her in, she squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Mom, she said softly, I see what he does. I see how he talks to you. Don't let them make you feel small. Her words carried more weight than anything the adults had thrown at me. In that moment, I realized she wasn't just my daughter, she was my witness. She was learning what it meant to stand tall when the world told you to shrink. The ring of social pressure kept tightening neighbors, relatives, even casual acquaintances, repeating the same refrain, don't make a scene. But every whisper only hardened my resolve. If they couldn't stomach the truth, that was their weakness, not mine. I wasn't going to protect Michael's reputation at the expense of my dignity. Not anymore. The courthouse smelled of marble polish and stale coffee, that peculiar blend of authority and exhaustion. I walked through the tall glass doors with Denise at my side, my blue evidence folder clutched like armor against my chest. My heels clicked across the floor, steady, deliberate, even though my stomach knotted tight. Michael was already there, standing near the defense table in a tailored navy suit that screamed money he no longer had. He grinned when he saw me, that same smirk he wore at family dinners when he mocked my boutique. "Rebecca," he said smoothly, loud enough for others to hear. Still pretending to play businesswoman, I see. Denise touched my elbow lightly. "Don't respond. Not here." So I met his smirk with silence, the weight of my folder, speaking louder than any retort. The judge entered, a stern woman with steel gray hair, who surveyed the courtroom as if she could smell dishonesty. We stood then sat, and the proceedings began. Michael's attorney opened first, painting him as the victim of a bitter wife. Mr. Turner simply sought a new life, the lawyer said, voice dripping with practiced charm. He supported his wife for years, while she pursued her boutique hobby. Surely the court can see this marriage was already over. My jaw tightened, but I kept my eyes on the judge, not on Michael. Then Denise rose. Her voice carried the calm precision of a blade. "Your Honor, this is not a story of a marriage simply ending. This is a case of fraud, financial abuse, and deliberate humiliation." She lifted the blue folder and began sliding exhibits onto the evidence table. Exhibit A, bank statements, showing over $40,000 in withdrawals from the joint account within the last 3 months, all without Mrs. Turner's consent. The judge leaned forward, scanning the documents. Michael shifted in his seat, his smirk faltering just slightly. Denise continued. Exhibit B, hotel. Receipts from Miami and Chicago charged to the joint account with accompanying room service for 2. She placed the glossy copies on the table, time-stamped and signed. Murmurs rippled through the small audience seated in the gallery. Michael's mother was there, clutching her handbag, eyes darting between us. Denise wasn't finished. Exhibit C, a credit card application made in Mrs. Turner's name, without her knowledge or consent, used by Mr. Turner to open a line of credit. "That is fraud, Your Honor." She handed over the papers, neatly tabbed with Michael's signature visible. The judge's eyes hardened. "Mr. Turner, do you deny this signature?" For the first time, Michael's confidence cracked. His tongue darted across his lips, his eyes flicking toward his lawyer. That must be a mistake," he stammered. I thought she approved it." Denise stepped closer. Exhibit D, text messages from Mr. Turner to Mrs. Turner. These messages not only announce his intent to abandon the marriage via text, but also admit to draining the joint account and mocking her livelihood. She read aloud, "Judge will laugh at your little boutique." That was Mr. Turner's statement. "Is that correct, sir?" The silence in the room pressed heavy. Michael's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering something, but the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Turner, answer the question." Michael's voice came low. "Yes, I sent it." My chest tightened, not with pain, but with vindication. Finally, his cruelty was on the record, not hidden behind smirks or whispered insults, but carved into the court transcript. Denise turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, the picture is clear. My client is not simply dealing with a divorce. She is dealing with a husband who defrauded her, attempted to humiliate her, and left her and their 14-year-old daughter without financial security. We ask for restitution of the withdrawn funds, the dissolution of fraudulent accounts, full custody of the daughter, and punitive damages for the fraud. The judge's gavel came down softly. I've heard enough. She fixed Michael with a stare so cold it froze the air. Mr. Turner, this court does not look kindly on deceit, particularly when it involves theft and the deliberate attempt to ruin a spouse. You drained accounts, forged signatures, and flaunted your betrayal. This court orders you to return all misappropriated funds, pay damages, and relinquish any claim to Mrs. Turner's business or personal accounts. Gasps filled the room. Michael's smirk shattered his face, paling as if the walls had closed in. His mother let out a sharp cry, burying her face in her hands. Denise rested a steady hand on mine. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't about gloating. It was about justice. About every night I stayed silent, every insult I swallowed, every dollar he thought he stole without consequence. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber one last time. Mr. Turner, you believed this court would laugh at your wife. Let me be clear, the only person diminished here is you. The gavel struck again, final and irrevocable. The courtroom buzzed, but all I heard was the sound of chains breaking. For the first time in 15 years, I was free. The downfall came faster than even I expected. Within a week of the court ruling, Michael's firm placed him on administrative leave. Word had spread fraud, misuse of joint accounts, forged signatures. In finance, reputation is everything, and his was now radioactive. By the end of the month, he was officially terminated. His office badge deactivated, his name scrubbed from the company website. I heard it from a client who stopped by the boutique, shaking her head. They couldn't afford to keep him, Rebecca. Too risky. Michael had always boasted about being indispensable. Now he was disposable. The ripple effects didn't stop there. His Miami companion, the 20-something with glossy hair and a taste for champagne, disappeared almost overnight. She stopped answering, his calls blocked his number, and was last seen draped over another man's arm in some beach club photo. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The humiliation was punishment enough. He had traded 15 years of marriage for someone who couldn't even stick around for 15 bad days. With his job gone and his affair crumbled, Michael's finances imploded. The court had ordered restitution, and he had no income to cover it. Creditors started calling. The condo he thought he'd move into fell through when his check bounced. One by one, the luxuries he paraded, Rolex golf clubs, tailored suits, were pawned or repossessed. The man who once ridiculed me for clipping coupons now scrounged for coins to put gas in his car. By early fall, he was forced to move back into Helen's cramped bungalow, sleeping in his childhood bedroom with peeling wallpaper and the same twin bed he left behind at 18. Neighbors whispered pitying glances, following him to the grocery store. The same people who once envied his swagger now shook their heads, muttering about hubris and comeuppance. I didn't have to lift a finger. He unraveled himself. One afternoon, Helen called me again, her voice trembling. Rebecca, maybe you could ease up on him. He's not well. I listened, silent, then finally said, he made his choices. The court gave him mercy. Don't ask me for more. She sniffled, but didn't argue. I hung up, staring at the boutique's polished counter, realizing I no longer felt anger. What I felt was distance, a clarity that separated my life from his wreckage. Michael had built his empire on arrogance and deceit, and now he was left with the ruins. He had mocked me for playing shop. Yet here I stood, my boutique thriving, my daughter safe, while he wilted in the shadow of his own disgrace. If poetic justice had a face, it was Michael Turner trudging back to his mother's house with a suitcase full of regrets and no one left to applaud him. While Michael's world shrank to 4 faded walls and a twin mattress, mine expanded in ways I hadn't dared dream. The boutique that he once sneered at as a hobby was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. Within weeks of the trial, word spread through town about the court case. People who had once whispered behind my back now walked into my shop with new respect in their eyes. "You showed a lot of strength," Rebecca, one woman, told me, as she bought a winter coat. "I'd like to support your business." Orders doubled. I hired 2 more employees, then 3. By the end of the year, I signed a lease for a second location across town, and by spring, a third. Each grand opening felt like a declaration, a rebuttal to every insult Michael had ever hurled. Local media caught wind of my story. A reporter from the regional paper came to the shop, notebook in hand. "Tell us how you built this from nothing," she asked, glancing around at the racks of carefully arranged clothes. I smiled, remembering nights of exhaustion, mornings of doubt, and the folder of evidence that had become my lifeline. "Perseverance," I said simply, and refusing to let anyone tell me my work was small. The article ran with the headline, "Boutique Owner Triumphs After Divorce Battle." Customers brought in copies for me to sign. Even more came through the doors, curious to see the woman who had turned betrayal into success. The most powerful moment, though, wasn't in a newspaper or a bank statement. It was at home. One evening, Lily sat at the kitchen table, her textbooks spread out, her pen tapping against the page. She looked up at me with eyes too old for 14 eyes that had seen more than they should have. "Mom," she said softly, "you showed me what strength looks like. I won't ever let anyone treat me the way Dad treated you." My throat tightened, tears threatening to spill, but I steadied myself. This was the legacy I wanted for her. Not bitterness, but resilience. Not fear, but dignity. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of sacrifice transform into something lighter, something powerful. Michael had tried to erase me with a text. Instead, he became the footnote to my story of reinvention. He had mocked my boutique. Now it stood as a chain with 3 thriving locations. He had drained our account. Now, my personal accounts overflowed with revenue he would never touch. He had told me no one would believe in me. Now the entire community rallied behind my name. Success wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom, about building a life on my own terms. And in that freedom, I found not just survival, but triumph. I framed the text. Some people hang photographs of vacations or diplomas on their office walls. I hung the message that tried to end me. It's over. I filed the papers. Miami tomorrow. I emptied the joint account. The printout sat behind glass in a simple black frame right above my desk at the flagship boutique. Customers sometimes noticed it, curiosity flickering across their faces, but I never explained unless they asked. For me, it wasn't a wound anymore. It was a reminder of the day I stopped being silent. Next to it hung the certificate for Local Business of the Year, the one I accepted in a crimson dress, standing on stage, while Lily snapped photos from the audience, her smile brighter than the spotlight. The 2 frames together told my story better than words ever could. Betrayal and triumph, side by side, inseparable. I often thought about the years of sacrifice, the promotion I gave up, the late nights, balancing accounts, the patience I poured into a man who only took. For so long, I believed sacrifice was love. But I learned something harsher, something truer. Sacrifice without respect is just surrender. That was the legacy I refused to pass on to my daughter. Lily asked me once, "Mom, do you regret it?" All those years with Dad, I paused, searching for the answer. Finally, I said, no, because those years taught me the most important lesson. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's protecting yourself. And now I can teach you that strength. She nodded thoughtful, and I saw resolve settle into her bones. My boutique chain kept growing, but more than revenue, what I carried forward was dignity. I spoke at a women's business luncheon, standing at the podium in a hotel ballroom, filled with faces that mirrored my own struggles. I told them, don't let anyone minimize your work. Don't let anyone write your story for you. Keep your receipts. Know your worth. One day, that preparation may save your life. Applause filled the room, but it was the quiet nods, the tears glistening in the eyes of women who had endured too much that stayed with me. Michael faded further into the background with each passing season. Neighbors whispered about his decline, how he barely left his mother's bungalow, how he seemed smaller every time they saw him. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't need to. His downfall was his own doing, and my life was no longer tethered to his shadow. My legacy wasn't bitterness. It was strength carved from humiliation and rebuilt into pride. Every time I looked at that framed text above my desk, I smiled, not with anger, but with gratitude, because what he meant as an ending became my beginning. 5 years have passed since that text message lit up my screen, and sometimes I still pause when I glance at the framed copy above my desk. Not because it hurts, but because it reminds me of the fork in the road I faced that day. I could have crumbled. I could have begged. Instead, I chose to prepare to fight with evidence to build something stronger out of the ashes he left behind. Today, my boutiques stand on 3 different corners of this city, each one buzzing with customers' laughter and the hum of possibility. Lily is thriving in high school, already dreaming of college, carrying with her the lesson that no one, no teacher, no friend, no future partner ever gets to tell her she is small. As for Michael, he remains a ghost of the man he once pretended to be, living quietly in the shadows of his mother's bungalow. I don't seek revenge against him anymore. The truth is, he punished himself far more thoroughly than I ever could. Success is not about destroying someone else. It's about proving to yourself that you can rise, that dignity can outlast betrayal. That's the legacy I carry and the one I pass on to my daughter. And maybe to you, if you need to hear it. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Preparation isn't paranoia. It's love for your future self. Don't let anyone belittle your work, your worth, or your strength. You are not small, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise. Now, I want to hear from you. What's one precaution you always take to protect yourself, whether in finances, relationships, or life? Share it in the comments. You never know who might need the wisdom you've lived. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of justice, resilience, and quiet strength, subscribe to this channel. New premieres every Sunday. Until next time, remember, strength isn't built in silence. It's built in the choices you make when the world tries to break you.